Hello and welcome to our Street View episode for October 2019. Today we're going to be talking about what are the national real estate issues that our federal candidates should be focused on in the coming election. And we're going to take a deep dive into the Toronto real estate market as we always do. We got lots to cover, so come on, let's jump right in. The 2019 federal election is in full swing, and you might ask yourself, what are the issues surrounding affordable housing and in Canada? And so the Canadian Real Estate Association has taken the initiative to come up with some real ideas. And there are three main topics that I'm going to touch on. One is affordability and debt reduction, and this is about a combination of things. It's the first-time homebuyer tax credit is $750, so as a first-time home buyer, they're able to write off certain expenses associated with buying their first home. But $750 is not much of a tax credit. We'd like to see it increase to $2,500. And that's more in keeping with what reality is, like legal fees, inspection costs, a variety of different costs that are eligible for that tax credit. Next is to reintroduce the 30-year amortization to first-time homebuyers under the age of 40. And becoming very specific about it, there's something inside that really does make sense. That if you're a younger person buying your first home, typically you're in the early parts of your career as well. You're at a platform where you're going to be able to have a greater capacity to afford higher mortgage payments as time goes on. And mortgages are typically done in that 3 to 5 year term. That after that 3 to 5 year term, you can choose to lower that amortization and get on track with paying off your home and becoming mortgage free as fast as you like. But really, it is becoming a barrier to affordability, especially in these markets such as the Greater Toronto Area, Vancouver, etc. Next are the rules and regulations about qualifying for a mortgage. And in particular, this mortgage stress test. And that's the idea where, current rates are, let's say, 3.5% for a mortgage, and that has a certain mortgage payment that has to fit in your income. Well, you actually have to qualify for a mortgage rate that's 2 full percentage points higher, let's say 5.5%. It's not quite that number, but you get the idea. So the thought is that during the time you own the mortgage, when you come out of the back end of your term, 3 to 5 years out, that you can afford, interest rates have gone up a little bit, you can still afford to own your house. So that's good. It builds in some cushion for affordability for the future. However, there are regional differences, and meaning that stress test can work very well in certain markets in different parts of Canada, but to have a blanket policy for all of Canada doesn't really make sense. Especially when you talk about areas like Toronto and Vancouver where employment opportunities and high-paying jobs, this idea that start at a base job and off you go. And it's also where we have more of the gig economy coming about. Yeah, and you'll like this, right? So the gig economy is all about somebody getting a gig to have a contract to work at a higher rate of pay, but with fewer benefits. Now, whether you agree with that philosophy or not, it is a growing segment of employment throughout Canada, and especially in these tech-centric cities of Toronto, Vancouver, Ottawa, Montreal, etc. So it is a reality. But here's why it matters, is that people that are self-employed are in a lot of ways treated like second-class citizens in the eyes of the bank. They like people that have had a stable job, have been employed for a long period of time, and those are the people that can handle making a better financial commitment long-term. Well, I'm telling you, I know lots of people that have had full-time jobs that have lost their jobs or switched jobs, etc. And maybe somebody inside a gig economy is better adapted to finishing one project and finding another and maintaining their financial commitments. There's something to be said about the entrepreneur and running their own little business in terms of their fiscal responsibility. And I don't think we have the data to suggest that entrepreneurs are more likely to not pay their mortgage than someone that's working in a full-time job. At least that's not the statistics that are being shared to us. So anyhow, the banks have their reasons, and I understand it's about managing risk. The other piece of that is that whether you know this or not, when you finish your 3 to 5 year mortgage term, you actually have to requalify for the existing mortgage balance that you have through the stress test, which means if you are full-time employed and during that time you lose your job and, oh, by the way, it's time to renew your mortgage, this can cause a problem with you getting a renewal. So it's very curious, right? And these are some of the rules that are in place now, but these are also some of the opportunities and changes that could be made. Lastly is the housing supply, and absolutely, real estate is all about supply and demand, and we have had a phenomenal amount of demand in the Greater Toronto area. That's a story that we've been telling for a very long time, and September is no exception. We're going to be getting into the details in a moment, but it's really about our capacity to build enough housing to suit the influx of new Canadians coming to Canada. Because we have a mandate or a desire to grow our economy, and the best way for us to do that is to open our doors and let people come and join this wonderful thing that we're creating together. But the question becomes, where are they all going to live? And everybody wants to own a slice of the Canadian dream, so housing becomes under some pretty high demand, especially when it's tied to some of the best paying employment in Canada, Greater Toronto area, lifestyle, all of these things that we talk about on an ongoing basis. The barriers to growth is regulatory control, bylaws. There's certainly a little bit of NIMBYism where we're trying to put density into certain areas of the city and people just don't want it in their backyard, et cetera. We understand that. We all feel that way. But it is necessary to make our communities more sustainable. We need more density to pay for all the city services and emergency services, schools, community centers, sidewalks, et cetera. And that's why the Greater Toronto area, in Toronto specifically, our property taxes are so low. You go out to the 905, look at the property taxes as a percentage of its valuation. It's 20% higher. Yeah, you pay a twin land transfer tax inside the city when you buy in, but that'll pay for itself in 5 years. Ooh, I get so excited about that. But I just believe that housing supply is a fundamental component to a barrier to creating affordable housing. And that's at a municipal, provincial, and federal level to support that initiative. And they've got to get all on the same page for making more housing available. Since I've been raving on about the supply and demand dynamic, let's see how it's translating into the Greater Toronto Area real estate market. And so the supply side is always represented by the number of new listings. And we can see, looking right over on the far right of that chart, the month of September was actually down just 1.9% in terms of the number of new listings. We can see this as seasonally normal. We can see how, coming out of the sleepy summer, kids go back to school and new listings come to market. That's the magic of the fall market starting up. And we can see how that will continue right through November. Starts to taper off and December gets very, very quiet as people wait for the new year before putting their homes on the market. So how does that translate to the demand side? So on the demand side, it's always the number of sales. And for the month of September, it's up 22%. Oh my gosh. Yeah, it's not such a big deal. When you compare it to the preceding months of August, July, June, right through the spring, you can see how that orange bar relates to what's been going on all year. And on a year over year, it sounds like a really big number, but it's not. It's just consistent performance, consistent demand that we're seeing throughout 2019. So I think other parts of the country not doing quite so well. Toronto and the Greater Toronto Area, a very solid market. And so how does that translate to price? Well, it is up 5.8% overall, and we can see how this is the continuation of that steady little incremental increase. Now it's busted through the 3 to 5% guideline I've been giving you over the last few months, but it's just 1 month. But perhaps this month will be a little bit lower. We'll see. But I think on the average overall, I think we'll still be in that same range. Inflation 2%, home values increasing 3 to 5%. That's far more sustainable. So let's take a look at the details on that. So our combination chart is a really great illustration of sales and average price for the different home types through the 416 to 905. And the column to the left represents the sales volume and the year-over-year change. And then the column over on the right is the column for average price changes. And we always like to pick out, what's happening in the market, the extremes. So we say, which property in which area grew the least over the last year. On a month-over-month basis, that'd be a detached home in the 416. At $1,360,000, it represents a segment of the market that's pretty skinny, right? There's not a lot of people shopping up in that spectrum, and there's not a lot of detached homes. When you look at the number of sales for detached homes, it was 909 homes transacted. The number right beside it is the same home type in the 416, 2,700, so triple the size. So the other end of the spectrum, which property class in which area has grown the most. And that would be a condo apartment in the 905. We can see how its average price has grown 9.2% year over year to a grand total of $497,000. And that's compared to the average price of a condo in Toronto is only $637,000. And when you look below that number, it's interesting that condos have only gone up 3.3%. And I would suggest to you that's one of the lowest month-over-month increases for condo we've seen all year long. So that's very interesting. Remember we talked last week that we thought maybe condo pricing had kind of like plateaued a little bit? Yeah, I don't want to say that I'm always right, but sometimes you get lucky, I suppose. Maybe it's the editing. Maybe it makes me look real good. But, you know, I always find this is a great chart because depending on the type of home you currently own or the one you aspire to own, you get a sense for where pricing's at and what things are growing at. And so that's always a healthy perspective. Well, that's our report for the month of October. I want to wish you and your family all the best through the Thanksgiving long weekend. And until next time, I am Matt Emerson of RE/MAX Hallmark Emerson Group Realty. We'll speak to you again very soon.